Hello, everyone. Welcome to the making of the Vanishing trial. So today we're going to discuss the behind the scenes work it took to do this film from behind the scenes. We'll be speaking with Wynett Yao, Travis Edwards, who were key and instrumental in developing the film. Sandra Avery, who is also in the film, and Adrian Arthur, who plays Chris Young. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
So I want to kind of start off with Wynett, and I want you to talk about the role you played in developing this film. The fact that the FAMM is a national nonprofit. We're unique in that we have a video team. We have a video team of 2 people. And together, they put this entire film together from start to finish. They developed the concept and made sure it got down to the finish line. So I do want to talk to them a bit about their individual roles and how they came to do this work. Wynett?
Well, I went from knowing absolutely nothing, having never heard of the trial penalty, to having to make a film that spoke to this really significant topic that is, we don't know about it, but it's doing so much unseen damage to countless hundreds of thousands of people and our criminal justice system. And so the challenge was, of course, first of all, to understand it more. And then the challenge was to define it without boring everyone to tears. And it's the same concept that you'll have with a scientific documentary or anything that's not about, something, the joke is always the royals, sharks, Nazis, how to get people engaged. And so that was always the challenge because, lawyers are, of course, are the ones who can turn this all around. They're absolutely crucial to everyone's fate, but they're taught to speak in a certain kind of language, and sometimes that language can make people confused or their eyes glaze over. So it was always a challenge to think, okay, how are we going to make this not abstract and really moving to people?
Okay. So, I mean, you guys had to do a lot of recreations. You had to do a lot of your stories were of people who couldn't speak for themselves. So how decide how to actually do this film? Because there were limitations in terms of like being able to like actually visit certain people, Eric Wine, for instance, or Chris Young. How did you decide to conceptualize this film?
Well, I do really believe in showing people's stories and letting people be moved by what's happening. You just don't know about it. And it was challenging because Eric and Chris are still locked up. And so they cannot communicate, and you could see that. And so we had to work around it. In Eric's case, his father was a very eloquent advocate for him. And in Chris's case, thank heavens, Adrian was able to bring him to life because he, literally they didn't even want to risk doing a phone interview because, they're trying to argue for him to get out. And then the recreations, which, I love doing. Some people worry about them, that they can be sensational. But I like to work. I think it's just like a natural history film because a lot of the animal behavior you see they didn't exactly get it at the same moment. Maybe it's not the same animal. And in recreating these things, I really tried to find out as much as I could. Sandra, you know how many times I bugged you. One more question about what happened. We couldn't make it exactly how it was, of course, but we could try to make it, as close to how it would have been as possible. And, we did that throughout shooting in the courtroom. All these, how it feels when you're arrested, are your feet and your hands shackled, all those things that would try to make it a true experience for people.
So can we talk a little bit about how different was it creating this film as a nonprofit versus creating this film having a big budget. I mean, we're a nonprofit. You're a producer director of a film, and you're used to having maybe a bigger budget for some things. How did that work out for you?
Well, I think Travis and I are both, I have to say, I'm going to brag here. We're really good at getting bang for the buck, and we were both united in that. We want it to be as good as possible. And we were just always trying to keep the money down because we know that we knew our budget was small. And so, when it, Adrian, I'm sure you've been paid more, when it comes to the actors' pay. And Travis had friends who brought in equipment for a good price. And, we just always took a look at how to make it happen without spending a lot of money. And we each did a lot of different roles. I did not have an assistant and I did all the casting in addition to directing and producing and writing. And Travis had a number of roles as well.
So Travis, tell us about that. Tell us about the number of roles that you actually had to have and hats you had to wear in producing this film. I was in the backseat watching all of this unfold, and I know that Travis had a number of things that he was doing at once all the time. And so can you tell us about that as the cinematographer and editor?
Yeah, I mean, both Wynett and I certainly dipped our toes into most of the things aside from acting. I think Wynett was a cameo in one of the shots. I think it's hard to tell it's her, but aside from that, we had a little bit of overlap with most things. But I think for something like this, in some ways, I wouldn't say it's freeing necessarily, but it is somewhat of a benefit because we were able to have our fingerprints on every step of the way. And certainly if you're working with a bigger team and you trust the bigger team, you have all those resources there. But it was nice to know that Wynett and I genuinely took this from an idea that came up in a meeting to, now we're dealing with a distribution deal and doing the whole process through. And so it is nice to see the entire thing all the way through and to play a little part in every one of those roles.
So I want to pivot and kind of talk about casting. We have here Adrian Arthur, who played Chris Young, and we have Sandra Avery, who played herself, who was also impacted by the trial penalty and served time. Wynett and Travis, can you walk us through stories, collecting stories, and then deciding how to cast and how we decided to cast Adrian for Chris Young's story?
Well, you always have to be lucky, I'll say that. I did auditions for many of the roles, and that was just a process of reaching out to all the local non-union actors, who, by the way, I'm very grateful to, because people came in and did a fantastic job, and I think really cared about the subject too. So I would ask for, these days it's pretty easy. You could just ask for, a file of an audition. And, from the beginning, Adrian was just right on it. He'd come back like a flash. Oh yeah, I memorized that whole thing. And, oftentimes I try to cast someone who does look somewhat like the character. But in this case, we had to break with that because, Adrian did such a great job as an actor that he was really the clear choice.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think of all the casting things, everyone that happened who came on that side of things, the things that I'm still most impressed with is, Adrian, your ability to memorize the speech that Chris wrote. If you were to give me a million years, I would not be able to get it anywhere near as close as you did. So kudos yet again on your memorization skills.
And then with Sandra, and she's not casted. Well, she is casted. There is a recreation of Sandra in the movie, in the documentary. But when did you decide to choose or decide to use people who are actually free and are able to speak for themselves? Why do that when you could have done recreations for the entire film, quite honestly? Why the mix?
Well, we tried to do it based mostly on Sandra being out, and found that it's a trial penalty. So it's a story about everything that happens actually before trial, all those decisions. So then we realized we had to recreate I didn't want to insult Sandra by having someone up who she felt was nothing like her, but I think she ended up feeling okay about it. I mean, that's always tricky when you're recreating someone who's out and alive.
Right.
And I think the actress did a great job.
Absolutely.
So, Sandra, how did it feel to see yourself and your story told back to you in a film version? And what did it make you, what parts of it did you enjoy? What parts of it were you more like glad to see turned out well or didn't turn out well? Walk us through your experience with this film.
I think it turned out perfectly. I'm in awe at the great job that Wynett and Travis did on this film. Even of course, I couldn't play the parts where I was still incarcerated, thank God. So the person they casted could have been me. I was a lot younger when this all happened. So I think that they picked the perfect person because it could have been me. She looked very much like I do. It did at the time, And what else? You asked me, how did I feel about?
Yeah, so I'll rephrase it a little differently.
I'm sorry.
No, so what was it like reliving the trauma of getting arrested, sentenced to life? We really took moments of your life and recreated them.
Right.
How did you feel having to go through that again? And would you say, and then, because there's a lot of times, this is not necessarily a true crime film. I wouldn't categorize it as that. But a lot of times there are a lot of criticisms about films where they do recreations because they feel like they're over dramatized. They feel like that they weren't true to the person. And as someone who actually lived this and was a part of the film, can you share a little bit about how you felt having to go through this and why you even decided to go through with it? Because you could have just said, no, don't use my story.
Well, there were times when I was first released that others, CNN and people like that, wanted to use my story, and I wasn't ready yet. But by the time this came about, I was ready, and it was tough in some circumstances, when I was being asked questions that were rather sensitive. But and for me personally, I'm okay with just putting it all behind me. But it's such a complicated and devastating situation that I felt relief in being able to talk to somebody about it for 3 days or longer, to be able to answer those questions and try to get that relief of saying, this is what happened, this is what's happening. And on the contrary, it wasn't overkill at all. It was, if anything, it was under. If anything, a lot of what happened wasn't put out there. In my particular situation, some of it was touched upon in others, like with Chris and with Keith, but it's a lot worse than that film even shows. The situation and what it does to your lives and the people around you, and the losses are huge. When all of a sudden your life is over and you pull in your driveway one day and your whole life's over. Everything you worked for 25, 30 years is gone. And, that devastation wasn't even shown in that film. So I don't think there was any drama there that was overkill at all. But I think we got the message across with it. And I'm real glad about that. And I hope it makes a difference, because there's so many people that are still incarcerated, and it's still happening to people every day. And it took me years to figure out what was going on, and I was in it. So I know that it's difficult to get that message out there, to make those who can make the change and just regular people understand what's going on. And I think it's very important.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. One of the things that FAMM does, and we try to do on a continuous basis, is tell the stories of people who can't tell them for themselves, and then make them in such a way that people are able to engage and to kind of really understand the impact that it has on people's lives. And a lot of times it is very hard to get some of these stories out to the media or to the press or very large platforms. With this film, what we essentially did was say, okay, we're going to tell the stories. We're going to tell them, we're going to show how it impacts people, and we're going to give it to them in a format that they can digest and use, you know, make the product so good that you understand that what you're watching is beyond just is in line with any of other films that you would watch or any other documentaries that you would watch. So that was a really important point, I think, Sandra, to explain that, you know, these stories need to be told. And FAMM tries, and this film was one of those attempts. I do have a question from the audience, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into that question. The question is about the music, and it's from John Rubin. He wants to know how the music was selected and composed. I could think of a couple of areas where it was just amazing to me, especially during Chris Young's scene. But I would love for you guys to touch on that.
Well, it takes money to have a composer work for you, so I haven't had that for a while. But there's some pretty good music libraries. And, you know, I think we just went through, Travis usually does the first pass of the music. And then I would come in if I felt I could improve it. And in one place in particular for Chris's story, I really wanted to get in something that, you know, felt more African-American. And but you couldn't go with jazz. I mean, that'd be too happy. So I think that the piece at the end, you know, I felt happy with because it kind of sounds like a spiritual. And to see Chris locked up and feel like, you know, I think it has echoes of slavery and, you know, how this is still going on, as well as being just bitterly sad. So that was the right track for that. I was happy with that. And then, you know, Travis, I don't know if you want to talk about your TikTok idea for the trailer.
Yeah, and I usually prefer to cut to music. And so I know that some of the sequences, even before we started editing them, we had pulled out. We just had some bins Wynett and I did, and we'd pull songs that we thought would be appropriate for it. And so like Chris's section in particular, I think that I had music in there and just something wasn't quite working, but it was cut to the music. And so when I was able to go through and pick out different music like that. And the ticking in the trailer, that was also cutting to the music of just wanting something rhythmic. And so I had to make all that based on just like audio libraries and stock audio stuff. So it's the edit looks ridiculous because it's all these things just strung together and a bunch of stuff running backwards, and it got messy, but I think it worked.
I wanted to go back to something that Wynett touched on. You touched on a little bit about race, basically. I wanted to ask you, Adrian, how did it feel? Well, basically, why did you agree to do this role in particular of Chris Young, a young Black man who is in a just dire situation, just incredibly dire. And he is, you know, he has advocates all over the nation fighting for him because his sentence is just unjust. His judge basically did not want to sentence him to life in prison, but had to because of the trial penalty. How did you feel taking on that role? Why did you take on that role? And did you feel like you were playing a stereotype?
So the first question in terms of why did I take the role? The opportunity came. I feel like the opportunity came at the right time in my career. I tend to like to pick projects that have like meaning that's bigger than myself. I always wanted my art to touch lives any way it could, but I didn't think that my art or my talents could possibly be life or death, to tell you the truth. And when I got the role, I read through the transcript that Miss Wynett sent me. And when I was listening to how Chris Young spoke in the courtroom, I saw an individual that changed. This was an individual that grew as an individual. He educated himself. He decided to kind of take his life in his own hands, but do it the right way. He never stopped fighting. I'm a person that believes in second chances, but also proving that you deserve a second chance. And Chris Young seems like an individual that while he was talking, he spoke about the things that he did wrong in his past, and he owned up to it. And I think that's the definition of a true man, a man that takes accountability, but also shows change. And when I took the role in terms of stereotype, I kind of was happy at the fact that it went against stereotypes, because we're dealing with a person who's in prison. You talk about his past, but then when you speak with him or you hear the way he speaks, he defies the stereotype. He kind of like goes against the stereotypical Black prisoner. And I was excited to represent that. I also knew that when I was doing the role, Miss Wynett definitely was a warm director. She gave me great direction. And just the whole overall process, I just knew that this project was bigger than me, and I wanted to be involved in this. So
that's awesome.
Adrian, don't call me Miss Wynett. No, but I may I jump in and ask?
Yeah, go on in.
Because I was really impressed that you and Jonathan Gibbs, who played the big drug pin, took a transcript that I showed you guys of an actual conversation between the two real people, and you memorized it on the spot, and then you started ad-libbing with it.
Right.
Scene before the arrest. And I'm just wondering how you got to that point, and what your thoughts were in doing that.
So once I realized how big of an opportunity this was and how important this project was, I didn't take it lightly. I literally night and day memorized these lines, because I knew that the day of, I didn't want to have to think about lines. I knew that you get one day of shooting and you got to get it right. And I'd rather have a bunch of direction when it comes to actually being the character than wasting time on lines. And I felt like if I was able to memorize these lines to the core, I could get the spirit of how Chris probably was as a person. So I definitely just wanted to come there and prove you guys proud, because you guys, I'm dealing with an organization that works from his heart. And you guys are doing this, like you said, you didn't have a big budget. You're doing this for somebody else that can't speak for itself. So I feel like it would be wrong for me to come in here and not do my part and not be the tool that you guys hired me to be. So I definitely jumped into it. And then you guys gave me the script way ahead. You guys gave me time to prepare. The communication between me and you was impeccable. And I just loved every moment of it. You guys referenced the pay. I actually think that the pay wouldn't have measured up to the actual impact that this could possibly make in somebody's life. So I took this project very serious, because it could be my brother, it could be my son, it could be my father. And it was very eye-opening. And I also used this project to show my kids in school. This is an educational piece, and people need to definitely know about this. So
Sandra, I have a question for you. The recreation, we've talked about this before, but I kind of want to have this conversation with everyone, which is a lot of people, one of the things that came up with the film was the worry that perhaps it was an over dramatization of the recreations. For example, the arrest. Oh, sorry. I think okay. So for example, I think I froze for a minute. So for example, the arrest and how people are treated. And for example, in Kevin's section of the film, they recreated the raid of his house. And for Chris Young, the recreation was, or Adrian as Chris Young, the recreation was getting arrested. And they felt really real, but some people thought that maybe it was an over dramatization. As someone who has actually been in this situation, did you feel like it was an over dramatization, or was it accurately or depicting it as you remember it?
I called him Keith, didn't I, earlier?
That's fine.
And Kevin's, I was happy that you did the part where they broke the front door down, or however they did it. I can't remember exactly how they broke into the house and the kids were under the table. That's the kind of thing that happens. And that's what happened to me. They just attack you. And I was a 120-pound woman, nonviolent. They didn't need 15 to 25 police officers pulling on people's lawns and coming out with guns, and they didn't need all that. And that's exactly what happens. It didn't show in my part of the film, but it did show that how that impacts the family in Kevin's part of the film. It wasn't over dramatized. It was absolutely happens exactly like that. And I like what was said about that, because it in the film, someone else was explaining, I forget who it was, the woman they kept going back to who was talking about it. And she said that
Lisa Lynn Jacobs.
Right,
Yes.
right. And she was pointing out that they weren't doing that for the right purpose. They weren't doing that to protect the neighborhood. They were doing that to intimidate, to show off, to whatever their purpose is not for the protection of the community. In fact, when they were doing this to me, my neighbor, a little old lady next door, came over and started saying, "I'm a citizen. What are you doing to her?" You know, because she liked me so much. I was such a good neighbor to her that she wanted to tell, and they had to walk her off because she was saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You know, this is a good woman here, a good neighbor. Why are you attacking her this way?" You know. Mm-hmm. So it and it's pretty sad. They had come to my house once before that particular arrest, and I was sound asleep at 7 a.m. and they just broke the whole front door down and took the frame out and everything. There was no reason for that. All they had to do was knock on the door. Mm-hmm. There was never any indication through any of this that I would be a threat to them. So no, it's not overkill at all. In fact, it's a lot worse than what we did put out there.
With so many stories to choose from, Wynett, and this is from the audience, with so many stories to choose from, how did you guys decide which ones to focus on? And that's from Christopher Gall.
So Christopher Gall did the wonderful graphics, which in particular, I think you see at the end and in the title. So we're grateful to him. I have to say, everyone who worked on this just got so into it, and it was really great to work that way. I felt that the first story, Eric Wyatt's story, brought the basics of trial penalty. You're offered, I'm suddenly blanking, is it 3 or 5? I think he was offered 5. No, I think he was offered 3 years. And he really didn't think he did anything wrong. He went to trial, he got 20. He's still in, and so that was just, wow, that's really clear. Okay, from 3 to 20, that's a trial penalty. And then Chris Young's story added the wrinkle of how they get someone to go from the plea deal into a life sentence. And that is, they enhance the sentence. They start adding charges. So this is really an old story. So many people have suffered from this. You had 2 priors. doesn't matter how small the amount of drug you had usually in those cases, you got life. And then Sandra's story, frankly, it was, okay, this happens to women with a slightly different twist, because Sandra was charged on her husband's charges as a co-conspirator, which makes it even more like, how did she get life? And he didn't. I mean, not to say that he should have, but, what's that discrepancy there? And then Kevin Ring's story was a white collar fraud. And, it was just, since he's the head of the organization, we all knew about it. So it was just so clear that, okay, this is a great way to get that story in. And I have to say, he never interfered at all. He never said, oh, you shouldn't do this or you have to do that. He just let us do it the way we thought we should do it.
What was good about the putting Kevin's in there was he didn't suffer from the trial penalty. So it shows the difference between what happens to someone who doesn't fall under the mandatory minimums and how huge that can be. Because had my judge been able to make his own decision on how I was sentenced, I would have been out in 5 years easy.
Yeah.
And he made that comment when he was sentencing me. I would never do this.
Right.
So, and one of the things that I did want to bring out about Kevin's story is also the immense amount of privilege that Kevin had. So we're talking about somebody who actually had the means, who was fighting this tooth and nail and still was being faced with charges like this. And then in the end, Kevin served, I think, 1.5 years in prison. But it took immense amount of resources, and he himself admits that had things been different, had he not had those circumstances, had he not been a white male, he may have gotten a lot more time. So Wynett and Travis, can you talk about, aside from choosing the different people, like, was it more to it than just simply that they each have a different story to tell, but is it the backgrounds that people come from, the attempts to kind of diversify the stories? Because I think there were a couple of different types of stories in there.
Sure. I mean, I think you always look at the whole gamut and you do your best to try to have, representation. I will say I would have loved to do another story as well. Maybe 2 more even, but you guys wanted us to finish. I think an innocent story would have been really added to it, because some people are so frightened by the threats of what's going to happen to them that they plead guilty even though they're innocent, and so there's a percentage of people who do that. And that's really bad. I mean, that is really bad. And then I would have liked to also to do a story of someone who took a plea. Again, not thinking that he had any choice, and that's very common. People like, gee, I barely did anything, or I didn't do anything at all, but I'm going to take that 7 years at 10 years because I don't want to go in for life or 20.
Adrian, was there anything about Chris Young's story that shocked you, or, I mean, was he relatable? How did you feel about Chris Young as like having to play him and having to get into his role? What did you draw from? Where did that come from for you?
So, like I said before, when I see Chris Young, I see every male, every Black male. We live in a society where a lot of Black males are searching for positive routes in order to uplift their life or provide for their family, or even just better themselves. And some people are more privileged than others. And some people just happen to walk down the wrong street or hang out with the wrong friends. And I've been that. I have been that child. I picked the wrong friends. I was at the wrong place at the wrong time, searching for my way. And it just so happened that I luckily didn't end up in the same place as Chris Young. So when I was playing his character, when we talk about the first scene where the police officers are rolling up on us, that's a fear that we always have. You're hanging around, when you're young, you're at the club or you're hanging out around your friend's house, and you don't know, like, we don't have the name tag on our head that says that we're innocent. So we live with that kind of like that fear or that paranoia that when the cops pull up, is this going to be the last time I'm seeing the air or seeing outside? Or is this going to be am I the wrong guy, or what did I do? Or do I got all my P's and Q's together? And you kind of like panic a little bit, because it's just like, you hear all the stories, you see your friends, you see other people that look like you going through stuff. And it's like that look that I had was, is this it? Is this my last bit of freedom? And I hope not. I hope this is an understanding person, or I'm able to speak my piece or have my voice. But a lot of the times there's no time to talk. I'm yelling and defending myself, and I'm hoping that the lawyer could defend me because I'm innocent. But if I'm innocent, if they believe me. So I kind of tapped into that, and that's why I love this role, because I could use this for the kids that I teach. I teach Black boys, and it's just like, hey guys, like, this can happen to anybody. Like, start now. I know this is the society we live in. Until the system is fixed, you just got to make sure you do your part. But that's the reason why I wanted to tap into this, because I definitely felt it. We shot that scene probably about 7 times, and every time I'm like, I get the luxury of the director saying cut, and then starting back, and I get to have the things on my knees, but everybody's not going through that. So I wanted to tap into that, because it's like, I have the blessing and the luxury not to go through it, but I don't know if I'm not going to go through it, you know? So that was the mindset that I had, because I wanted to kind of like this to be for everybody that looks like us. Like, this is kind of like a documentary for all of us. And I just wanted to do my part, so.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Sandra.
I was going to say, I had almost the opposite effect, for all the wrong reasons, of course. But when they pull up on me, I think this is going to turn out okay, because it's a fair system, and there's, they'll figure it out. They'll hear my truth. They'll see that I'm a hardworking person, and this situation doesn't warrant anything serious. So when they were trying to tell me that there was a possibility of life in this, I didn't believe that. I thought that was just something they were saying to try to make me do what they wanted me to do, or to say what they wanted me to say. It never entered my mind that could actually happen. So it's it's sad how I could have a totally different feeling when they all roll up on me,
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that watching specifically the Chris Young scene, when he gets arrested, that you played so well, Adrian. When I first saw it, and I looked at Wynett and Travis, and I said, oh my God, this is amazing. This is actually accurate. There was a question about, is this too much? And I was like, no, actually, I'm pretty sure this is exactly the sentiment that a lot of people feel when that happens. And the truth of the matter is that, that scene was shot, earlier in the year. And then fast forward, here we are, and the protests or mass protests around the nation about arrests and cops and how they treat people. And I'm like, well, this is the other end of it, right? Like, so you get arrested, and then things like this, what happened to Chris Young, what happened to Sandra Avery, could happen to people, does happen to people.
The amazing part about this is just a couple of days ago, my dad called me on the phone and was like, hey, what's going on, man? And I'm like, what happened? He's like, I just saw something on YouTube about the Vanishing trial. Are you okay? And I'm like, no. I'm like, nah, it's a movie, it's a documentary. He was like, man, that thing looks so real. And like he was almost in tears because it was just like
Aw.
Oh my God.
he really thought, like, it's kind of like he saw him. He was like, is this real? But I don't know if his mind was playing with him, but it was like, I know this is the type, but it looks like this could be real. And I'm like, yeah, it's a documentary, but the fact that he was scared just watching documentary kind of like shows the kind of like the paranoia that even parents may have about what's going on. So, but
Well,
kudos to you guys. You guys did an excellent job. My father about to cry.
yeah, and I know that certainly when we were in the courthouse, that afterwards we all got to sit there and say, we're all going home to sleep in our beds tonight. And so, I mean, I think that is the unfortunate thing, that we are hoping that when people are watching the tougher scenes like that, that we realize that these are real people, these are real stories. And as Wynett was saying earlier, this is as accurate and as much justice as we can give their stories for this context. And so, yeah, hopefully we are able to transport people into the difficulties that everyone went through here.
So, Wynett, you have something to add?
I was just going to add that, you know, Chris Young's lawyer, Brittany Barnett, was concerned about the recrease because she didn't want it to be the usual stereotypes of, you know, what a bad thug he was. And so I felt really happy that we could flip the script and show from his point of view, you know, what his life was like, what he was like as a person, and then this happens, you know, because we need more imagery like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Travis, I want to go to you. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I want to talk about the techniques and gear that you use. I know you guys use like handheld, steed cams, drones. How do you decide what to use, when to use it? Go.
Well, I mean, to the prior point, it's effectively 4 people's stories throughout the documentary, and so we want to do them as much justice as we could. And so I think that if we had gotten a little bit, I don't know, like too flashy with it, that it would have detracted from the story. And so we definitely we used drones. We had an amazing Steadicam operator. We had dollies. We had jibs. We had all these things. But hopefully at the end of the day, it just serves to tell the story in the best way possible. So that was definitely a big hope there. But then we also wanted each section to feel different, so that it didn't just feel like we were copying and pasting the same thing 4 times. And I mean, unfortunately, there's such a diversity of stories out there that we looked at for it. But yeah, it's also there are a lot of talking heads in there. We've talked a lot about the people's stories, but there's a lot of information in there. And so we did different things. We tried to think outside the box and how we could make those feel fresh and not just, hey, I'm an academic person, let's watch bullet points pop up on the screen right here.
Right. I was going to talk about that, like choosing and selecting experts to speak in the film. Was it simply because, you know, this person is the best person to speak on this? What went into the selection of experts? Am I frozen again? So, okay.
As you know,
Sorry.
As you know, because you were part of this process, we tried to get a range of views and a range of people saying them. You know, once you really pointed to that direction, I was so happy to, you know, that someone cared that our extras not be all white men. So, you know, I do have to say that our partner, NECDL, the head of that, was very generous to say, okay, you know, even though I'm sure he wanted to be in the documentary, you know, he designated someone else who was a woman and a woman of color. And so we were able to show, you know, a variety of voices talking as experts in this field.
Yeah, I will say this, that representation matters. And I think especially in a film like this, where we're talking about the trial penalty, where so many people, Black people are impacted, it's very hard. You could literally do this film with all white experts. You really could. You could literally do this film and but at the end of the day, it's important that everybody sees themselves. Even with Kevin being white collar, and there's a diversity of different types of people there, is so that people can see themselves in the film, whether they are an expert, whether they are a person who could be impacted, and or a person who just simply wants to know more information. Like, you just want to make sure that you are representing the world as the world sees it, as opposed to how we want to portray it. So I think that it took a while to pull the experts, because it was not just, it wasn't just about Black or white. It was also about women. Do we have enough women? There are plenty of women in the criminal justice system trying to help make change, or have had a huge impact. And so we wanted to be really intentional about that. And I really enjoyed how you two stepped up, and you were going to do it anyway. You guys are all awesome, but like, you know, there was a lot of intentionality about making sure that the film reflected that diversity, and having not all the defendants be all Black, because that would have been another way of being like, okay, it's only happening to Black people. It's not only happening to Black people, but now you have people of color as experts and defendants, and white people as both experts and defendants. So it's all of us instead of some of us, and that makes a difference. So can we talk about a little bit about footage limitations? And I want to talk about this because in the grand scheme of things, we have a lot of people who are currently incarcerated where we want to tell their stories. We would love to have visually show what this system has done to people, but literally we can't get into the prisons. We literally cannot, we're not allowed to film there. There's limitations on media even. So a lot of these stories, once someone has been convicted and is doing time, it's very hard to get their stories told. Can you talk about, as film producers and as editors and cinematographers, how difficult it is to tell the story of someone who's currently incarcerated when you cannot have that person in the film and it's a visual medium?
Yeah, you put it there. That's it. That was what we're constantly like, what are we going to use? But I mean, I think that I was really going for imagery, you know, for what we could control, what we could recreate and shoot. I wanted imagery of the prisons as an underworld, because it really is tragic and amazing that there are hundreds of thousands of people in our country behind bars, not getting any light, getting really crummy food in this tiny little space, you know, so that's truly hell. And so I was always looking for some kind of shadowy feel. You know, Travis and I talked about doing a long exposure, although we never seem to have enough light to do it. But like the first shot in the film, I think has that kind of like, you know, somewhat grainy, like it's leaving a trace of something, to bring you into this shadowy world, you know. And we also use the old trick of Vaseline on the lens. When we were shooting some of the Sandra recrees, again, just to give it this, it's unreal, what's going on, you know. I mean, I don't know from personally, you know, thank heavens, but it must just feel like you're in some other zone. You always say you were on Mars, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I refer to it as Mars because it was just, you're just taken away from the world in an instant. And there's a lot of aliens involved.
Exactly.
Truly, it's just a whole nother world that you've never experienced before. And it's like overnight, it's like you're, you know, just sucked into this.
Yeah, and can't get out. I mean, that's really a nightmare. And then we also shot a lot of silhouettes because, you know, as one expert, Mary Price, says, the trial penalties, the deals are done. There's no transparency. The deals are done when nobody knows about it. There's no record. You know, it just take it now, or, you know, you're in trouble, and the deal goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're trying to marry the imagery with the world that we're talking about. And then, you know, Travis, I don't know if you want to talk about, as the editor, the shortage of other footage.
Yeah, we had to, if it wasn't for the little line that shows the duplicate footage in the editing softwares that we were using, we would have just wound up using the same things over and over again because it's such a dry well of footage to use for those things. And so I can't actually remember how far along we were in the process when we went to go film with you, Sandra, but I know that we have about enough footage of you sailing to fill an entire feature-length documentary. Same thing with Kevin. We have like 2 hours of him playing basketball. Like, we have footage. We need to just keep filming. We need to keep filming. And it was such a great thing versus how limiting it is for all of the other stories in this, where we just, you know, there's nothing, we have no pic, you know, for both Eric and Chris, there's only so many pictures because they both went in so young and there's just not that much else to show. So we definitely had to stretch and think outside the box there as much as we could.
Yeah.
Well, I think you did an excellent job. I was impressed with I was there for the 9 hours that we were filming. And I was impressed with how well you chose each scene, each story, part of the story, and how well it fit into what was being told by the narrative people, and how it just fit right in. It was an excellent job.
And I just want to add that it's because we didn't have this, you know, tens of thousands of money to pay for stock, you know, because there is stock footage out there, but the really good stuff costs a lot of money. So we were restricting ourselves, and that was getting down to the dregs.
Mm-hmm. So I do have an audience question for Adrian mostly, but of course, Wynett and Travis, you might be able to answer this. Have you wanted to reach out to Chris Young yourself? So have you wanted to talk to him about the role you played? I'm not sure that he'll be able to see this film, but
Oh, definitely. He's definitely somebody that I can learn from. This is somebody that's going through an amazing situation, if I want to call it amazing. It's tragic, and but for somebody to still have an uplifting spirit, to still be fighting, it takes a special type of individual for that. So I would like to just sit there and talk to him and kind of like just pick his brain and figure out how is he doing it. Do you have any hope? How are your spirits up? How are you maintaining this hope if you have it? What do you plan on doing it? I would just love to just talk to him, man, because he's still a human being. And there's this stigma that you think that just because somebody's in a cage, they're an animal. And it's like, no, it's not. They're not. They're human beings. And I would just love to visit them, talk to them like a regular brother. So yeah, definitely. And ask him how I did. If he ever was to see it.
This documentary itself will give him hope that he can hang on to for quite a while.
All right.
You know, that the much necessary hope.
Yeah.
God forbid it if you ever lose hope in there, you know.
All right.
yeah.
I am in touch with Chris, and he's just an amazing person. His mind is very active. You know, he studies finance, and he's always kind of giving financial advice to the people inside. He's always telling them, you know, get yourself educated. He has a wonderful spirit. I don't know how he does it. He has a very curious mind. And I recently introduced him to a friend of mine who's an astrogeophysicist, because I knew he would want to talk to him. And I can't actually keep up with some of the conversations that Chris has.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chris, we're all hopeful for Chris because his story is definitely a tragic one. And him and Eric, both Chris and Eric Wynett, did not deserve all the time that they got. They should not be in prison right now. I just want to make that very clear, that the trial penalty is a disservice to bright minds and people who want to come out and contribute to society. I mean, there is no purpose served for having Chris Young or Eric Wynett in prison today at all. But here we are having to make movies to show that there's a grave injustice done, having to get as many lawmakers and as many people celebrities even involved to show the grave injustice that is being done to the people in prison. And these are just two stories of two people who are currently impacted by this. And I think that there's something to why so many people are, at least in the criminal justice world, are taken to this film, because for once, somebody is telling that story that so many everyday people have to deal with. It's a nightmare for a lot of people. And so there we are. So I would like to ask you guys if you have any final remarks. We're at the close of our panel discussion. So Wynett, do you have any final parting thoughts?
Well, I mean, it always occurs to me that thought, it takes a village, which is about raising kids, is really true about a film too. I mean, they were really, even though we didn't have a big budget, there were so many people involved who brought their talent and goodwill and made this happen. And it was really, it was a happy experience making it. You know, I do thank you and Kevin for putting an umbrella over our heads that said, okay, we got it, just do what you need to do. Because if that doesn't happen, if you get like interfered with a lot or, you know, crunched down on a lot, it does affect the quality of the film. And so, you know, I think if it turned out well, it's because everyone was on board. And so, yeah, it took a village.
Mm-hmm. Travis?
Yeah, I would just say that, I mean, Wynett and I are immensely fortunate to be able to have, I mean, I guess it's inherent to a lot of documentaries, but we got to enter these little snapshots of people's lives, and just the gracious amount of time that people are, I mean, even Chris, talking to him and the Core Links correspondence with him, just the time that they're willing to give. And I mean, Sandra, the fact that you let us come down and hang out with you for a couple of days in Savannah and film your story and relive some of the, you know, the hardest days of your life over again. It's very humbling, and I think it hopefully puts everything in context for the bigger message that we're going for as well.
Sandra?
I'm in awe at the film, the documentary. I think it'll make a great impact, and I'm just praying that we can get it out to the people that can make a difference for us, for the thousands that are still. You could tell the story over and over thousands of times, and that's the sad part.
Adrian?
Well, I would just like to say thank you for this opportunity to be a part of, which I believe is Chris Young's redemptive story. I don't think this is over. I think this is a huge chapter in this journey. And I just can't wait to look back at this time period and say thank you for allowing me to be a part of his journey. So.
Well, thank you. And I want to tell all of you, especially Wynett and Travis, it has been a pleasure. Not a lot of communications departments or even nonprofits are able to have a video team, and I just happen to have the best video team out there. Your vision, your foresight, your ability to execute and to get things done. I trust your judgment all the time. You provide excellent quality for FAMM itself, and then this documentary is going to change hearts and minds all over the nation. You guys know that it's a big deal for me, for us not to do nonprofit video, and for anybody who's watching, what I mean by nonprofit video is, you know, you stick a camera in a room and you film somebody for like 5-10 minutes, an hour, and all of a sudden you got this big film that's full of nothing. Sorry for people out there who put all their heart and soul into their videos, but you know, talking heads for hours and hours. I mean, you know, like, you guys have really elevated FAMM video in general, but now you're really going to be changing hearts and minds all over the place. Thank you, Sandra, for lending your story to us and being such a huge part of FAMM and being an advocate for us and allowing us to use your story to help other people get out, because that's what it's about. And then Adrian, thank you so much for being Chris Young, because I think that you were the perfect actor for that. I love seeing your face on all the posters and the trailers and everything else. I feel really great about that, because you're telling the story of someone who can't tell it for himself. He has great backing on the outside. We're all out here, but he's still on the inside. Until he's out, you are contributing to making sure this man gets out of prison. And shout out also to Eric Wynett, and we also are with you, brother. We want to get you out too. So we're there with you. And that is all.